Hello and welcome to This Week in Focus Polity and Governance. These are the articles that we are going to discuss. Let's start with the first topic of today's discussion. Right to information is now right to deny, where the editorial quite literally breaks down the problem that are being faced with the Right to Information Act. The legislation which actually provided a mechanism to enforce our fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression, a subcomponent of it has been read by Supreme Court under various Supreme Court judgments, especially Raj Narayan case, that right to information about public act is a fundamental right. Now, because there did not exist a legal mechanism so that the citizens in a day-to-day life can use the right to information, it took around 30 years for the Indian state to provide a legal right to information. Right to information is that legal entitlement as of now, which has provided a tool in the hands of all the citizens to get information from all the public authorities in our country, something that we'll talk about in this discussion. And when it was passed, there was a huge sense of enthusiasm everywhere. That was for everyone to see. Within 10 years, RTI became the basis for unraveling of very mega corruption scandals in our country. It became the basis for unearthing of a lot of the financial improprieties going on at the state level as well as the central level. But what we see in last 10 years, since 2014 and 15, there has been a pushback against the culture of openness which was supposed to be created by this legislation. There is again going back towards right to information, and that's why the title of this editorial was rightly that right to information now means right to deny information, because there have been a lot of changes in the law. There have been Supreme Court judgments which have now made it extremely easy for the public authorities, for the government employees to deny information, which goes against the idea not only of the law, but also goes against the fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression. So in this discussion, we will understand the genesis of RTI, we will understand the main provisions of the RTI Act, and then we will understand the main demand side, supply side, and institutional legal problems related to RTI. It is important for us to understand all these dimensions because RTI is directly mentioned at one point in GS paper 4 syllabus. You can see information sharing and in the government and right to information, and at the same time it is also mentioned indirectly as a part of the syllabus of GS paper 2. Citizens charters, transparency and accountability, and institutional and other measures. So you can see that transparency, and in order to enforce transparency, without which it is very difficult to enforce accountability, which is answerability, RTI Act is the only tool as of now. So let's first understand the context of RTI, or right to information. Right to information as a legal right came in 2005, but it existed as a fundamental right even before that. When the Supreme Court started liberally reading the Constitution, not literally reading the Constitution, which the judges of higher judiciary had done in the initial 2 to 3 decades of the promulgation of the Constitution of India, after the emergency, we see that there's a tendency in the judiciary where they started to, widen the horizon of the fundamental right. And in the same length and breadth, they dawned upon Article 19(1)(a), which literally reads, every citizen of our country shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression. Now, speech, in order to be associated with the wide word freedom and not liberty, all the resources have to be provided, have to be enabled, so that if a person wants to express the fully informed speech, that opportunity should be available to every citizen of the country. Now, citizen might not want to use that information to articulate this speech, that is their own decision. But if they want to have all the information before they can make a speech, they should be entitled to with such a speech. And in a state where almost everything is being controlled and commanded by the state authorities, law and order is controlled, welfare is controlled by the state. In fact, most of the economic sectors were either directly controlled and commanded by the state, or they were regulated or facilitated by the state. And so it became extremely important to secure the freedom of speech and expression of every citizen, to allow the flow of information from the public offices to the citizens. And that's when, in Raj Narayan case, Supreme Court reads the right to information about public acts, as a part of fundamental right. And it is rightly so. There are famous quotes with respect to information. Information has been regarded as the currency of democracy and enemy of authoritarianism. Every state which wants to kill democracy, or any state which wants to act despotic, the first change that the state does or goes through is to put increasing curbs on the flow of information. And if you want to understand how, you don't have to go anywhere. Just look at India when we were being ruled by the Britishers. Britishers had created laws which made it punishable offense to share information related to the state working, functioning public information with the people, which obviously goes against the idea of Article 19(1)(a). For example, during the time of Britishers, we had, and we still have, ironically, Official Secrets Act, which made it a punishable offense to release the information in public as long as that information deals with the government records. Any record that is labeled as official secret, releasing that record in the public becomes a punishable offense. We had acts like Evidence Act, which made it a punishable offense to release any information that has become a part of a court trial. We had Civil Services Conduct Rules, which by default prevented the public servants from sharing any kind of information with the people. And so you can see how easy it is for us to prove that the British rule in our country created a culture of secrecy. But the Constitution of India after 1950, because of Article 19(1) clause 1 subclause A, demanded the culture of openness. And that's why in 1950, Supreme Court issues this landmark judgment. However, the problem still was, there was no legal and regulatory framework which could be utilized by the citizens to demand information about public acts from public authorities, which meant clearly that even if you have to seek a particular information from a district magistrate's office, let's say about who are the beneficiaries of this new government scheme, you would have to go to the Supreme Court, just like in order to get any of the rights enforced as far as their fundamental rights to Supreme Court. Every time you would have to seek even a minor information, you would have to knock on the doors of the Supreme Court, which is obviously quite impracticable. And because the government was not taking any steps, it was Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, a civic society organization in the state of Rajasthan, initiates a long drawn movement, a social movement, collective action, fights it for 2 decades to build consensus around why there needs to be a law which can be utilized by the citizens to effectuate, to actualize in practical life the fundamental right to information about public acts. And that's when in 2005, when UPA government comes, one of the first set of legislations that they pass is right to information, and create procedure so that in order to get information from public authorities and public offices, you don't have to go to the Supreme Court to get it enforced, to go to High Court to get it enforced under Article 32 and Article 226. And that becomes Right to Information Act. So before we go there, you can see Gandhi ji talked about real Swaraj will come not by the acquisition of authority by a few, but by acquisition of capacity by all to resist authority when it is abused. And you can see what transitions from the first part of the quote to the second part of the quote is nothing but the right to information, because it is only the right to information which the capacity among the common people to question the government. In order to hold the government accountable, you need to first have data information in your hands. Utilizing the information, by the analysis of that information only, that you can raise the question on the on government schemes and policies and actions and whatever. In state of UP versus Rajnarayan, the Supreme Court says the people of this country have the right to know every public act, everything that is done in public way by their public functionaries. To cover with a veil of secrecy of the common routine business is not in the interest of the public. In SP Gupta versus Union of India, the concept of an open government is the direct emanation from the right to know, which seems to be implicit in the right to freedom of speech and expression guaranteed under Article 19(1)(a). If you really want to express and make a speech, you need the access to the multi-dimensional aspects of that speech. For that, if you are required to have access about public acts and information, you should have that access. In the deprivation of such access, you are making a speech in desert. We need to convert the desert of speech where there is largely no information available. What kind of speech can you really make in the absence of any kind of information? And that's when you can see that Right to Information Act was brought. So don't be bothered if you're not able to see this. There is a link in the description of the video. You can download the PDF and you can open the slide and you can follow me wherever I am pointing the fingers and marking it on the slide. It was important for me to put every information on one slide so that when you have to revise it from the perspective of prelims as well as mains examination, you have the entire analysis on one page. So the one side of this is a static information about the Right to Information Act, what it majorly covers. Obviously, it's a huge act, so not everything is relevant for the civil service examination. And then the lower side talks about the issues. Let's discuss it one by one. Right to Information Act provides the right to every citizen, because Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A is available only to citizens. Right to information about public acts, the state of India, public authorities, is available only to Indian citizens. So if an American citizen wants to seek an information, it can request the government can deny it. But if the citizen of India wants a particular information from the government has to provide that under Article 19(1)(a), and it is actualized in practical life through Right to Information Act. Every citizen has the right to request information from a public authority. Public authority has been very, very widely defined by the RTI Act. It has been defined by any body that is established by the Constitution of India. So any body that is established through the Constitution of India, which means constitutional body, which means CAG, which means National Commission for Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe, National Commission of Backward Class, Election Commission, all that are covered automatically. Any other authority that is established through law passed by the parliament or the state legislatures, so all the statutory legislative bodies are automatically covered here. But at the same time, it also says any other authority established by the government notification. So executive body like Niti Aayog is also covered. Law Commission of India is also covered under this particular act. And then it adds another section to say that any other entity significantly or prominently funded by the state funds will also be covered, which means that it includes any NGO, for example, Akshay Patra, which is very, very significantly funded by the state, or any other company where the government has majority stake for the purpose of RTI becomes a public authority. And so funding became one of the major way in which, so it is applicable to public authority. Public authority has been defined very, very in a very wide sense. Now, when it defines public authorities, it creates certain obligations on public authorities. What are the obligations on public authorities? Every public authority has to maintain records and proactively disclose certain categories of information to minimize the need for formal request. At the same time, every public authority will institute an information officer, public information officer. So let's say there is an office of income tax branch in Delhi or in Noida. Every such division will have a PIO, public information officer. The person who will be responsible for handling all the requests of information by the citizens of India. So this is the person who has been made legally responsible, and every public authority has to institute PIOs. They are the officers who are responsible to give you information when you seek such information. And it also creates a limit, time limit, 30 days. Any information that is submitted has to be responded within 30 days. The denial of such information can lead to a quasi-judicial body known as Information Commission, State Information Commission and National Information Commission, to where you can file a grievance that I asked this public authority and this particular PIO to give me information. It has been more than 30 days. This person has not been denied. This person has denied me information, or has not responded, or has given me an irrelevant information. And then State Information Commission and National Information Commission have the power, like a civil court, to call them into action, and if they do not respond, to take action against the PIOs. This is largely the legal framework of Right to Information Act. So these are the rights that were provided. Let's not focus on the posted as of now. Obviously, because Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A has a lot of grounds on which your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted, automatically those restrictions should also be applicable on right to information. So for example, you cannot express anything that goes against the idea of integrity and sovereignty of the India, that goes against the security of India, that contempts the court, or that is defamatory. And obviously, right to information cannot be used to seek such information. For example, where it hurts the sovereignty and integrity of India, incitement to an offense, breach of privilege of the assemblies in our country, which are cabinet papers, because it is a constitutional secrecy clause, which is a part of an investigation, or any other personal information. These are the information which are exempted from the framework of RTI. So if you ask a public authority about a particular information, and if it deals with any of these aspects, they can just give it to you in writing, because this information deals with the security India or friendly relation with a foreign country. It has been entrusted to us by the country, and we are not going to reveal this information, then that is a denial of information. But barring this, largely, it is mandatory for the public authorities to disclose every request of information that is made by the citizen of India within 30 days of period. So you can see that the institutional framework is Central and State Information Commissioner and Central Public Information and State PIOs, depending upon how large, or is it a state authority, or is it a central government or Central Public Information Authority. But the functioning of the RTI in last 20 years, 2005 to 2025, initially, it was used in a great way to uncover a lot of scams in our country. But you don't see large or mega scams being uncovered. And that's why the editorial had to write this article about as to how right to information has transformed into right to deny information, or it has become sort of routine that almost every information is being denied, and even information commissioners are not able to take any proper action to hold the PIOs accountable. And that is just a violation of each of our freedom of speech and expression. Now, if you go and analyze the problems being faced by RTI, the problems are so vast that they have to be segregated into 3 dimensions. Number 1 dimension is that there is a demand side problem. The problem of Indian citizens. It's just not the problem of the government and the state. There's a demand side. When the demand is being made for an information, there is a problem over there as well. There is a supply side problem, which means the problem with the government, the challenges that the government is creating, or the challenges that the PIOs are creating. And then there are certain legal and institutional problems with respect to the conflict of RTI Act with other acts and flaws within the RTI Act. So let's first look at the demand side issues. There is a section 26 of the RTI Act which says that every public authority will create schemes to raise the level of awareness about RTI Act among the people, especially vulnerable sections of society like women, SC and ST. Because if you do not belong to SC, ST, if you're not vulnerable, you are already empowered, and the chances are that whatever information you seek, you might have it or you might not seek any information. So what information do we seek? I was expected to be the beneficiary of this particular welfare scheme. I did not receive any money. So I want to have a list of all those people who have been credited money. So generally, if you come from an upper caste empowered section, you generally do not need. But the problem is that the survey has found out 90% of the public authorities in our country have no program to create awareness about right to information. And right to information is, you can see, second, third generation rights. First generation right, fundamental right, speech and expression. Then right to know. And then on the right to know, you have right to information about Public Act legalized into right to information. In country like India, how many people have this awareness that in very few rupees, they can seek whichever and whatever information they want to seek from a public authority? Very low. So you can see that because the awareness level already is very low, it obviously does not serve the purpose of RTI. But all those people who know about RTI, their quality of awareness is very low. So most of the people you will meet, they will know about RTI, but if you ask them, within which time framework do you think that the government should give us the information, they will not know it. If you ask them which are the offices that are covered under RTI, they will not know it. If you ask them, if they deny the information, if their information is denied, can they challenge the decision of the public authority? They will not have this idea. And that's the bigger problem as compared to, because all those people who have awareness about RTI should have a high quality of awareness. And the problem is non-implementation of the law. So this is not the problem about the law, it is problem about enforcement. At the same time, there is a lot of constraint that is faced while the application is being filed. Now, Section 6 of the RTI Act says that it shall be the responsibility of the public information officer to assist the seeker of the information while filing the application. No such mechanism has been made by most of the public authorities in our country. Section 26 and 27 obligate all the public authorities in our country to create guidelines to guide the filing of the application. Most of them, and most state level public information officers and public authorities have never created this mechanism. At the same time, the information that is being sought, because of the lack of awareness, it is so ill-conceived and it is so random, it makes the task of the public authority extremely easy and smooth to give the information. Because in order for you to extract meaningful information from the government authorities, from public authorities, it is very necessary that you form the request very precisely. And because the awareness level is low, the knowledge about the legal term is so low that when the request is being formulated, the formulation of the request itself is very poor, and obviously then the information, if ever it is, if in cases where it is revealed, it obviously turns out not very helpful. There is a provision in our RTI Act which says, the Section 2J, inspection of the records. Section 2 basically defines what is the information which can be sought, which means minutes of the meeting, notification, orders, all the catalogs, all the booklets, all the record keeping should be available. RTI Act also says that you can request the inspection of all the public documents. So citizens can go there as a watchdog and say, show me the minutes of the meeting. I don't want any particular information which you need to print out and give it to me. I just want to inspect this particular register. Just show it to me. I will be seated here throughout the day. I will flip through all the public records and then I will go back. No one actually knows about this, and because the government has not publicized, because it is obviously a matter of inconvenience, and that's why people generally not use it. So you can see that there is a significant challenge on the part of the citizenry, then that is the demand side of the problem, demand side issues. But then obviously the majority of the problem lies here, and institutional issues, the supply side issues. Section 4(1)(b) of the RTI Act says that in order to usher into the era of openness from the culture of secrecy to the culture of transparency. Most of the public information which can be sought under RTI should already be converted into the PDF and should be available on your website as a downloadable format. I mean, that is the idea. Automatic disclosure. So that everyday PIO should not go through the trouble of sorting the information. The PIO can say that look at this file. Already all the beneficiary list has been published by us. This is what you seek. Take it. Take this register, and that's going to be the entire thing that you need. But what we have found out that there is hardly any state government department and very few central government department of any prominence which follow the rule of automatic disclosure. The information has to be forced through an RTI request. Only then they entertain the request. There is no use of article the section 41B. At the same time, obsolete record management system has become one of the biggest problem of RTI. Most of the state level government departments and local authorities, they still maintain their data in the form of handwritten catalogs, which means that they are still physical records, not computerized and digitalized. Now you can understand, in order for the information to be revealed, how difficult that would be if your backend data management system is not aligned with the right to information. So it makes the task of the information officer extremely difficult. Because if the data is computerized and digitized, it takes 2 minutes to sort and convert it into any printable format and release the data. But if it is itself maintained in a very old-fashioned, antiquated method has been used in the form of physical files being printed every day and files being just kept in some storerooms, how difficult it will be. At the same time, most of the PIOs are devoid of any infrastructure. They are devoid of any training. They themselves have no information about RTI, because remember, the public information officers themselves are the employee of the same office. So if a person, let's say, is working in, let's say, any particular government department, let's say Public Works Department, PWD. One of the officers of PWD will be made a PIO. So he could be either an engineer or a manager level officer. That person will become a PIO. That person has been trained into the culture of secrecy, and the same person now has been made the person responsible for the release of information. There is a huge inertia in the favor of denial of information, lack of knowledge about the provisions of RTI Act. And because the post is transferable, there is no permanency. Even if the person wants to, they will not be able to specialize in the release of information. That simply adds up to the process. So you can see it, obviously, untrained PIOs, non-availability of basic infrastructure. If you demand in last 20 years, how many PWD projects have been carried out by private contractors? Now it will probably need thousands of pages of printout. The cost has to be borne more often than not, we see. So for example, only 7% of the rural level panchayats had printers. So any information that you seek from local governance might not be available to you for the lack of infrastructure. So these are the problems which act on the demand and the supply side. Let's now look at the institutional issues. We have seen that there is an appellate body. So for example, if a PIO denies an information, you can go and challenge it in the State Information Commission or National Information Commission. Now it is the independence of national and state level information commissioners which will determine the decision. By amending the RTI Act in 2019, most of the element of independence of the National Information Commission has been taken away by the current government in order to make sure that any information which the government does not want to be revealed will never be revealed. So not only the appointment process is controlled, the terms of service, salary and pensions and allowances, everything is now controlled through a government executive order. Executing that, the government can literally control all the information commissioners working in NIC and SIC. At the same time, there continues to be a legal conflict with RTI. Right to Information Act carries a section which says that any information designated as official secret under Official Secrets Act can be revealed if the revelation of the information outweighs the secrecy in favor of the public interest. So if there is larger public interest that is being served with the release of the information, then the information can be revealed. But ultimately, it is the discretionary power of the respective public authority to decide whether the public interest will be served or not, which automatically leads all the public authorities to deny the information hiding behind Official Secrets Act. It has become a routine to designate most of the files as official secret and then basing that categorization deny information about most of the acts. That's why it has become a right to deny information. That's why the second ARC recommended the harmonization between Official Secret Act, which goes in this direction, and RTI, which wants to go in this direction. And now it recommended that the Official Secret Act should be repealed and some exceptional exemptions should be incorporated within RTI. And only then we will be able to usher in the era of right to information. Now, few prominent cases or few prominent instances of RTI deals with the order of the National Information Commission designating the political parties as public authorities and mandating them to release information on the demand of the citizens. Association for Democratic Rights, as soon as the RTI came into existence in 2005, they sought information from all recognized national parties to release the name of top 10 donators, the top 10 sources from where they received donations. And some few parties responded, few parties did not respond, saying that they are not public authorities for the purpose of RTI. This was challenged in NIC, and Information Commission in 2013 ordered that for the purpose of RTI, political parties are public authorities. Because number one, they are substantially funded by the state. They get land from the state. They get advertising time free of cost, which is nothing but the funding. And these are the parties which command the state apparatus. So India's politics is party driven. So you cannot deny that you are decoupled from the state, and because you are not, you have to give information. But when the RTI Act was diluted, since then the order still exists, but you can see that NIC has lost the power to enforce it over the political parties. No political party has instituted the PIO so far, still maintaining the same framework. RTI came into existence because of Prime Minister Modi's degree, and also it came into news because of PM Cares Fund, where it was revealed that PM Cares Fund is not a public authority because it is largely a private fund set up under the trust headed by the chairmanship of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his personal capacity, and the trust contains defense minister, has a home minister in it, but all these people, they are in the private capacity, and the fund has been built on the basis of private donation from the people of India. So it is not a fund that comes from or flows from the Consolidated Fund of India. Also, now we have Digital Data Protection Act, where any digitized data, if it is rated as a personal information, automatically is excluded from the purview of right to information. So if any information uniquely identifies a singular person, then you cannot seek it under RTI. So you can see that RTI faces a lot of institutional, legal, as well as procedural challenges. Until and unless we resolve all of these issues together, we cannot usher in the era of openness of information, and the ability of the citizens to hold the government accountable will obviously keep on diminishing with time. So I hope that this discussion has made the provisions related to RTI very clear. RTI is a long topic. It takes around 2 hours for us to cover it. Let's now move on. So this is, you can see, Central Information Commission, Constitution and Powers. So maximum 10 members, including Chief Information Commissioner and other information commissioners, appointed by the President, recommended by Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition or Union Cabinet Minister, nominated by PM, removed by the President. Grounds of removal are proven misbehavior and incapacity. Procedure, same manner as UPSC chairman, which does not involve the Parliament. Next news deals with concern regarding delimitation. So there has been a lot of debate going on with respect to the delimitation or maybe the reallocation of the seats in Lok Sabha and recarving the constituencies for the first past post the system or for the elections to the lower house, House of the People. Now, if you look at the syllabus of GS paper 2, you have parliament and state legislature structure and issues arising out of these is a part of your syllabus. This particular hot burning topic directly deals with the structure, because when you look at the composition of the parliament, president, the House of the People and Council of the States, this topic directly deals with the House of the People. It is also very important because it hits at the core of the India's federal structure. Because the apprehension that has been raised in the meeting by all the chief ministers in South India is that by carrying out the delimitation process, the political power is largely going to shift to the North India. North India still has more influence as compared to the South India, but after carrying out the delimitation, the entire power will shift to the North India. And this apprehension is very, very firmly based in data and facts. Now, you look at any kind of ordinary legislative exercise, it requires the majority of members present and voting generally in both the houses, unless and until it is a very selective financial matter, something like money bill. Then you have a very important constitutional amendment legislation, which has a little bit more tougher requirement for amendment of the constitution. If you look at the composition of Council of States as well as composition of House of the People, you can see that the allocation of seats in both these houses have been done on the basis of population. Now, it makes sense in House of the People, but it doesn't make sense in Council of States because it is a federal chamber. It is a connecting chamber of the India's federal structure. So ideally, all the states, all the stakeholders of the India's federation should have equal representation there. But there also, you see the majority of UP, Bihar, North Indian states, UP having 31 seats in Rajya Sabha. So there is a dominance in the Lok Sabha, dominance. And because the representation is connected with the population, the larger the population, larger the political heft. And that's when the South Indian states are concerned that if the delimitation is going to happen now, more power will shift towards North, making them lose even the veto power that they hold so far virtually in the constitutional amendment process or in the ordinary legislative exercise. Because if the delimitation is done now on the basis of current proportional population, we'll see how the numbers are going to drastically change. Okay, so let's first look at the constitutional provision, article number 82, readjustment after each census. Upon the completion of each census, the allocation of the seats in House of the People to the states and the division of each state into territorial constituency shall be readjusted by such authority and in such a manner as Parliament may by law determine, provided that such readjustment shall not affect the representation in the House of the People until the dissolution of the then existing House. Clear. Provided further that such readjustment shall take effect from such date as the President may by order specify, and until such readjustment takes effect, any election to the House may be held on the basis of the territorial constituencies existing before such readjustment. So let's not go into the next proviso. Before that, let's understand this provision as to why it was created. Article 82. Why do you need to create Article 82 like mechanism? You need to create Article 82 like mechanism because in a democracy, the fundamental principle of democracy is political equality. Political equality dictates every citizen has equal right to vote. Now, equal right to vote can be diluted if the allocation of the seats is not according to the population. So, for example, if a particular state, let's say a particular virtual state has own state, which means the state country, let's say, has two states, state A and state B. State A has, let's say, 30% population. State B has 70% population. And let's say out of these two states of this particular country, we have to create a Lok Sabha of 100 seats. Now, it is not very complex to understand that any allocation of the seats which violate 3:7 ratio goes against the idea of one person, one vote. Let's say if I do not allocate the seats in the same proportion as the population, if I allocate equal seats, let's say 50 seats go here and 50 seats go there, it is not very difficult for you to fathom as to why the value of the vote casted by each person in state B is less than that of state A, because only 30 people or 30% of the people are electing 50 MPs, whereas 70% of the population of the country is electing the 50 members. So you can see that the value of each person's vote in this particular kind of political arrangement is not going to be the same. A vote casted by a person in this state carries way much more weightage as compared to the weight of the vote casted by a person in the state B. And that's why you can see it is extremely important for us to reallocate the seats every 10 years. Because it is understood that with changing time, the distribution of the population keeps on changing because of changes in mortality rate, changes in fertility rate, changes in migration patterns. And because the migration pattern and combination of these three factors would result in the change in the distribution of the population across the country, you need to reallocate the seats, more seats where more population has shifted, taking it away from the areas which have become relatively depopulated for various reasons. So the state of India kept on carrying this exercise for a very long period of time, but it had to be stopped. It has to be prevented at one point of time. It has to be freezed, and it was frozen because it was realized that by coupling the population with representation, we are actually incentivizing the population increase. Because the population control and family planning largely lies in the hands of the state. And so we are disincentivizing the population control. Why would a particular state want to carry out population control and socio-economic development when they clearly know that with socio-economic development, the fertility rate drops? And so in order to incentivize that, Constitution was amended to put a freeze. That is what you see in proviso. Also that until the relevant figures of the first census taken after 2026, earlier it was 2001, but now it is 2026, have been published, it shall not be necessary to readjust the allocation of seats in House of the People to the states and the division of each state into territorial constituencies as may be readjusted on the basis of 2001 census. So what it says, so if you look at the current political scenario in our country, the seats that are allocated to all the states in Lok Sabha, they are on the basis of 1971 census, the population data that is 54 years old. At the same time, the constituencies within each state is on the basis of 2001 data that is 24 years old. Take your time to absorb this. And because of this freeze, we see a lot of problems arising. Because of this freeze, we see a lot of problem. The number one problem is the dilution of one person, one vote, one value. It is obviously depreciated because the population in last 50 years has unevenly changed. South Indian states have not only stabilized population, their fertility rate has in some cases gone below fertility rate. Whereas in the last 54 years, we have seen rapid increase in the population of North Indian states like UP and Bihar. So you can see that the value of the vote casted by a person in Kerala is way much more than the value of the vote cast in UP. And this is what it is, that if you do the maths right now, you can see that 32 lakh people get 1 MP in UP, the corresponding figure is less than 18 lakh in Kerala. So the weight of voter in Kerala is nearly double that of someone who lives in UP. That's the problem. The second problem obviously is that not only you violate this, you deny the states of their rightful constitutional claim to political power, which the Constitution of India clearly said belongs to the population and the representation. However, there is another problem that people often ignore. The rural bias in the policy making is because of the lack of delimitation in last 24 years internally. The allocation of the seats internally and the carving out of constituencies within a particular state is on the basis of 2001 census. But we have seen the rapid pace of urbanization in last 20 years, last 2 decades. These urban mega centers have come up. The concentration of population has tripled in urban areas, selective urban areas, but there is no representation in the house of the people of these new and emerging urban areas. And that's when you see the rural bias. You wonder as to why the population has been urbanized, but the Lok Sabha is still rural. So more and more representatives from urban areas should have been there in the house of the people. But because the internal constituency carving out procedure has been frozen on 2001 data, it has not been done. And so after the Women Reservation Bill, Nari Jan Shakti Adhiniyam, the constitutional amendment to provide assured political representation to women in legislative assemblies as well as in the House of the People was done, it was clear that now the delimitation will happen. And now, because it became actually clear that the delimitation is going to happen, now the concern of the South Indian state has become extremely vociferous in trying to put their idea about the consequences of the delimitation, because everyone knows that if the delimitation is going to happen on the basis of Article 82, it is going to create problems. It is going to create problems because it is going to shift. While it is going to respect and uphold the basic political equality, it is going to enable the states enjoy their valid constitutional claim, and it is going to recorrect the rural policy bias. It is going to create problem with India's federation. It is going to create problems for India's federation because it is going to penalize the states. It is going to put a penalty on the states which have done massive work in their social and economic development, which have done great work in public health infrastructure and education. Not only they had to take great measures, they had to spend a lot of money to bring them to the stable populations, which was ultimately the purpose of population control policy. And now it is going to be a double jeopardy, a double penalty if as a result, if their political representation is cut down. It is also problematic because the penalty is just not limited to the political representation. It is another penalty in another sense, because these are the states which are the economic powerhouses of our country and contribute in majority in the form of direct and indirect taxes. And so, if you look at it, the basis of representation can be population, but another basis of representation is taxation. Remember the original quote, no taxation without representation, the basis of American democracy. And that's when they say that obviously there is a cultural divide that exists between North and South in terms of language, in terms of societal outlook, in terms of religiosity. And now, by going, let's say if the government, if this decides to go ahead with the delimitation in the same way, it is going to add another dimension to that fracture, adding politics to it. And that's when the fracture between the North and South will be permanent. So the We don't know as of now as to what will be done. So you can see redrawing of boundaries of constituencies, Article 82 for the House of the People and 170 for the Legislative Assemblies, one value, one vote. Why it was paused? Population control concerns, socio-economic development focus, the lack of delimitation or the freeze on delimitation has diluted, has caused misrepresentation and has ensued rural bias in policy making. Its implementation will see political power shifting from entirely to North India, and it will widen the fracture. So the way forward is that, look, we can see the declining trend of fertility even in North India. So Uttar Pradesh has drastically come down below 2.5, it's around 2.4. So within 10 years, UP will be at the replacement level. In 15-20 years, Bihar will be at replacement level. And so probably the proportion of the population of every state in our country by 2040 will almost come at the same level as it existed in 1971. So this delimitation is a very short-term measure, because if the delimitation will happen after 20 years, probably it will give the same numbers in terms of representation in Lok Sabha. So if we have kept this frozen for 50 years, we can wait for another 15 years as well. So that is what the argument of South Indian state is. Also, there is one suggestion where, just the way European Parliament has been formed, it is known as Cambridge Compromise, where there are two elements of representation. A minimum assured representation is given to all the participating states within European Union, and then the remainder of the seats are distributed on the basis of proportion of population. So in that sense, every state maintains a minimum political representation, and then the impact of more population is also reflected. So this can be one of the mechanisms if the government decides to go ahead. Also, there is certainly a need to provide for equality of representation in the Council of States or in Rajya Sabha, because if you say all the states, all 28 states in our country will have equal seats, let's say 2, it will take away the larger fear of the South Indian states, because even if they lose the decision making power in House of the People, they are assured that now, because they have equal power in Council of States, they can prevent any constitutional amendment which is not agreed upon by them, or they can prevent the steps taken by the North Indian majority of the North Indian states in House of the People can be overruled by majority of South Indian and like-minded states. So the current fear is that the Council of States itself is on the basis of population, and if the House of the People also continues to be on the same basis, then obviously it is going to create the problem. So I think largely this idea is clear. Let's now move on to the next discussion, which is about artificial intelligence and its use in criminal justice system. So there was an editorial previous week where artificial intelligence is expected to impact crime and crime control both, and so it can be both taken as a boon as well as a bane, depending upon how proactively the state starts taking effect to counter the negative consequences of use of AI by the criminals and the positive consequences of use of AI by the state authority to modernize the criminal justice system. Now, it is not very difficult for us to understand as to how the AI can be misused by the criminals. So for example, we have already seen those funny memes and videos where the images and the voiceovers are done artificially through the use of AI tools. There are a lot of AI tools which can change the face of a person in a video, that can also basically change the voice to create absolutely real looking videos. So that's the threat that is a very big threat to the criminal justice system, because that can become the base of fake news information that can create riot and public order situations. At the same time, the AI can enable autonomous operations, and that can execute complex hacks with minimal human intervention, which can basically make it extremely easy for the miscreants to flood. So it just maximizes the capacity of the troublemakers or the nuisance creators. Also, it can be used to create synthetic identities. Earlier, you would require to edit a particular Aadhaar card. Now AI can automatically edit and recreate the very, very real looking identities, and at the same time it can make the entire process of creating nuisance, especially digitally, autonomous by the use of AI tools like ChatGPT and Grok. Now, if we use artificial intelligence and integrate it into the police functioning and intelligence functioning, it can enhance the transparency of India's overburdened police and judicial system. Obviously, for example, it can greatly help lawyers in trying to find out the relevant case laws. It can extremely be helpful for the police in their own search if it is integrated as a tool. It can obviously enhance procedural efficiency. It can improve complaint registration, investigation tracking, and data analysis. So, for example, when you go out to file an FIR for a criminal case or for a criminal event that has happened in your life, using the help of AI, you can immediately know which are the relevant sections which the police should be using while registering an FIR, which the police is not using, and analysis of patterns. The pattern analysis can be easily done by the law enforcement agencies to create the smart police. So AI can assist in case supervision and reduce the administrative task. Obviously, the use of AI tool can provide smart policing and also it can be integrated into the judicial systems. Now, the question on AI in governance is less likely. It is more useful for GS paper 3, but this was a tangential topic. So that's why we have taken it up, so that when you write an essay on AI or an answer, you can talk about how it has the capacity to basically improve the governance structures in our country. Next news deals with Panchayat Devolution Index. The Ministry of Panchayati Raj has recently published the Panchayat Devolution Index. The index was last published in 2014. Over the past decade, the national average score has increased from 39.92 to 43.89. Now, first let's briefly understand what Panchayat Devolution Index is. When the Constitution was amended by 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment, by introducing new parts, Part 9 and Part 9A, to create rural as well as urban local governments in our country, the idea was to make them the institution of self-government, autonomous self-government. Now, in order for any level of the governance to exercise autonomy, you need funds, functions, and functionaries so that they can be functional. Just like the central government needs functionaries, it needs human resource, it needs money, and it needs real authority. The problem was that the power to devolve the real functions, real finances was given to the respective state authorities in our country. So we saw in last 30 years variable level of devolution in the states. Some states gave some real powers. Most of the states did not really devolve the real powers which were necessary to make them functional at the local level. And that's why one of the ways to nudge the states into, push them, convince them, persuade them into giving more power is the mechanism by Ministry of Panchayati Raj to come up with an index to let and show the mirror to every state. Look, this is what you have done, these are the powers that you have given, and so that people can also be made aware about what are the real powers that should have been given but have been given. Now, in order to carry out this, it has designed 6 parameters. The parameters are framework, functions, finances, functionaries, and capacity building. Framework is whether the basic provision mentioned in the constitution are adhered to by the states or not. In Kerala, all the constitutional provisions that are mentioned there are strictly adhered to. What are these constitutional provisions? Holding regular elections is a mandatory. Setting up a state finance commission is mandatory, but not every state sets up a state finance commission every 5 years. So Kerala is a topper there. Functions: how panchayats fulfilled civic responsibilities like sanitation, waste management to health and education. Tamil Nadu is the topper here. Finances: efficiency in the devolution of funds to panchayats and sources of their funding, whether from their own resources, borrowing, or from the state and central grant. Karnataka is a topper in the financial devolution. Functionaries: strength and performance of panchayat officials and the infrastructure that is available to them. Gujarat comes out as a winner there. Capacity building: how states are expanding the knowledge and skills of panchayat officials to fulfill and take on more responsibility. Telangana. And accountability: the framework in place to audit and monitor the functioning of panchayats. Karnataka. So you can see largely that the larger scores, you can see the fragmentation between north and south here as well, that largely more devolution is done here, whereas the least has been done in Punjab, Haryana, and Bihar. And obviously northeastern states are way less. In fact, Nagaland is obviously has been exempted from this. So this is the Panchayat Development Index. The one of the aspects is also the representation to the communities that have been given assured reservation by the constitution. So the constitution says the proportional representation of SC/ST both in membership as well as in chairpersonship. Similarly, 1/3 seats have been reserved for women. Now, the fact that 1/3 seat has been reserved means that 33% of the functionaries would be women. But the population of the women is 50%. So you will see real empowerment only when you will see deviation above and beyond 33%. And that's when it highlights that the highest women representative in India are in Odisha, 61.51%. Then Himachal Pradesh has 57%, Tamil Nadu has 57%. In Punjab, the population has 30% SCs, but 36%, so just 6% above the population more are SCs, whereas in case of ST representation above and beyond the constitutionally guaranteed representation, it is the scheduled tribe. And for Bihar, OBC representation is around 40%. Now, this is not a constitutional provision. Constitution gives the power to the legislative assemblies to modify their own local government laws to provide reservation to the backward classes. So most of the states have done that, and so in case of Bihar, it is 40%. The last news for today deals with the epic number, because recently we have seen this controversy emerging where the two epic numbers coincide, which means the two voter ID cards have the same epic numbers, and so that raised question over the duplicity of the voting list and the voters, and that can raise serious question about the integrity of the whole electoral procedure in our country. So let's first understand what are epic numbers and how they are located. They are unique ID for every assembly constituency. There is a portal. Aeronet portal is a web-based application used for elector registration issues to handle all processes pertaining to the registration, migration and deletion of names from the electoral roll. Aeronet automates the process of electoral roll management and helps in removal of duplicate entries. Now, if you are finding duplicate entries, it is clear that Aeronet has not performed its functions quite well, and for something as serious and as consequential as voting list, this cannot be agreed upon. The controversy came as a form of decentralized allocation. So the Election Commission said is that it is not a duplication. The fact is that before 2022, the electoral list were regionally maintained. So there is a possibility that the same number got allocated to two persons. Don't worry, it is not the same person who is voting at two different locations in our country. So the Supreme Court has said these are no duplicate voters and designated polling stations. They are two different people with the same number, because these numbers were being allocated by separate regional authorities. So while we are now creating one single voter list for the entire country, we are going to take care of that even the Aeronet numbers, even the epic numbers do not overlap or do not match. So this is it for Polity and Governance this week. We'll come back every week. On every day, you get every subject specialized discussion on topics like geography, environment, polity, governance, ethics, economy, science and technology. Stay tuned on our channel. Follow us on our Telegram, Instagram, as well as on YouTube channel. Thank you.